Good afternoon. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Today on Newsfeed at noon, a Senate hearing is underway on the reimplementation of the NCAP and the planned EDSA rebuild. Was French President Emmanuel Macron shoved in the face by his wife? We'll tell you his reaction later in the show. Billie Eilish wins Artist of the Year at the American Music Awards. And OPM legend Freddie Aguilar passes away. Thanks for joining us. The Senate Committee on Public Services, together with the Public Works and Finance, are conducting a hearing on the reimplementation of the NCAP and the planned EDSA rebuild. Hannah T is monitoring the inquiry. She joins us now live from the Senate for an update. Hannah, what has been discussed so far?
Mai, on the first day of the NCAP enforcement, the MMDA recorded a total of 1,112 violations, mostly because of disregarding traffic signs and illegally entering the EDSA bus lane. Now, that's a significant drop compared to last week's 3,982 violations, according to the agency. To ensure accuracy, the MMDA says each violation is manually validated by their personnel and must undergo a supervisor's approval. For vehicle owners who wish to contest, they may submit an affidavit and a deed of sale, especially for second-hand vehicles that weren't registered under the new owner. The MMDA is working closely with the Transportation Department, which is expected to issue a new policy this week to clarify second-hand vehicle accountability. Motorists can also request video evidence of their violation through the agency's online traffic adjudication platform, which means there's no need to physically appear at the MMDA office. While cameras are now in place, the MMDA says there are currently only 300 plus CCTVs, not enough to fully automate traffic enforcement. For now, traffic enforcers will remain on the roads. Officials are also looking into complaints of fast red lights, especially in portions of EDSA, saying stoplight durations will be adjusted to avoid confusion and promote safety. The upcoming rehabilitation of EDSA is also set to begin on June 13, and it will require massive traffic rerouting. As a temporary solution, a segment of Skyway Stage 3 will be opened to motorists for free. There's no official date yet, and it's currently being negotiated with San Miguel Corporation, and the DOTR pushes for the plan with no toll increase to assure commuters that the plan is to ease traffic without adding financial burden. Another out-of-the-box move is, of course, a one-month dry run of an odd-even coding scheme starting June 16. During this period, the DOTR says no fines or tickets will be issued, and the goal is to just monitor traffic flow and determine if the scheme can decongest EDSA. Currently, the number coding window remains from 7 to 10 a.m. and 5 to 8 p.m. To support this transition, 400 buses now operate along the EDSA busway, an increase from the previous 350. And the DOTR is also maximizing train operations with plans to add more four-car train sets that can carry up to 400 passengers. Mai?
Hannah, what about alternative routes? What's the final plan of the MMDA for this?
The MMDA says they've already released an alternative route in Mabuhay lanes, but of course they plan to include new options and are still being finalized ahead of the EDSA works. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you. Hannah T reporting live from the Senate. Joining us now for his thoughts on the EDSA rebuild, motoring journalist and road safety advocate James Deacon. Hi, James.
Hi, Mai. Feels familiar. It's like deja vu.
Good to see you again, James. I hope you're okay. I hope you're doing well. Well, first of all, let's talk about, before the EDSA rebuild project, let's talk about this NCAP. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a little concerned, but like a lot of people, I just want to establish first that I do support the idea of NCAP. I think it's a great deterrent. I think it's can be a very efficient way to enforce discipline. But that's in theory, and in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. So my concerns are, like when they first started, there's a lot of technology gaps that concern me. For example, we saw people who were getting apprehended or issued a violation for changing lanes, but then the camera doesn't pick up that there is some big obstruction on that lane, which forced them to change. There's situations where ambulances were trying to get past, people had to move out of the way, and then they were apprehended through the NCAP as well. So there are all these concerns that still need to be addressed before we can fully feel comfortable and for me to fully be able to endorse this program. I don't think that they have been yet. I'm not also very convinced that the MMDA have the technical capabilities and the manpower to be able to do this. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I do walk in with very good concerns or a lot of concerns.
Yes, you mentioned manpower and technology-wise, we also don't have the same technology as that of other countries, right? And the same concerns also raised by Senate President Cheese Escudero on the NCAP, like notices of violation won't get to you ASAP, right? And penalties might pile up.
Correct, Mai. These are things that I was discussing before while there was a Supreme Court ban or TRO on it. I was discussing it with the stakeholders and the private sector and trying to make sense of it all. And one of the suggestions I made is, can we possibly have an updated LTO system where we can make sure that our phone numbers are inputted and we get something like an OTP. We get some kind of direct contact as soon as the apprehension is done, or sorry, NCAP, the camera gets you, you should be able to get an SMS. That's one way to solve that. And that way we know, because the problems that people are having is that you might lend your car to somebody, to a family member or a driver. That driver might go, not work for you anymore. And you don't get these fines for a year, or in the case of brand new cars, sometimes 3 years when you renew your registration, after which you've accumulated a really unrealistic amount of fines. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And why didn't we do this during the time that the TRO was there? Why didn't we sort this all out? Nothing against the MMDA, but this is not their core competence. The technology, they're not known for that. They have their core competence, but it's not in this. So maybe we should be outsourcing this to proper private industry that really know what they're doing and can be held accountable on a different level. And that way we can be assured that it's safe and it's fair. That's all people want. I've not met anybody that is actually against the idea of NCAP because they do feel that it will improve traffic, but they are genuinely concerned about being unfairly targeted or even just lost in translation.
Same things I'm wondering, like why aren't concerns resolved during the TRO, when the TRO was in place, right? Right now, we're still asking the same questions. And also, one other thing causing us anxiety, the EDSA rebuild. Also, people are asking, is the end benefit worth the hellish traffic that we're going to experience for the next 2 years? And why is it going to take so long?
Very good question. We don't know the answer to that because we don't know what the rehabilitation project will eventually look like when it's done. We are just, again, being positive and holding, giving benefit of the doubt that we all understand EDSA needs improvement. So people are willing to sacrifice. The concerns that I hear out there is they're not necessarily not willing to sacrifice. They just don't want to sacrifice in vain when they see loopholes of other people getting through. For example, you've got the number scheme, which is horrendously designed to be unfair to certain numbers like number 3. If you go through the number scheme, the odd-even scheme, the number 3 plate is basically coding on EDSA 4 out of the 5-day working week. They're only allowed on a Thursday, if I read that correctly. And then people who have 8 on their plate are in a better spot. They can drive like 3 days a week. Things like this is discriminative. I mean, I understand what the MMDA are trying to do, and I understand that their hands are also tied. But this is another thing that frustrates me, is we shouldn't have let it get to this stage. We're trying to renovate a house that nobody wants to move out of or can move out of. That's the same thing. We're now at this point where we're saying, well, we can't do anything because, there's no other alternate route. Well, we should have had forward planning. Then they say, okay, well, what about the alternate routes? I heard you talking about the Mabuhay lanes. Have they cleared that yet of all the parked cars? This is a recurring wound that never heals. Every single time we do this, whether it's Christmas, whether it's some kind of project, we are always talking about the cars that are parked in the Mabuhay lanes, and then they might have a clearing operation that works for a week or two or three, and then we're back to square one. We light up the tunnels when APEC come in, and then we turn the lights off when they leave. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are the root problem that at least Secretary of Transport Vince Dizon knows about. He admitted this to us in a meeting the other day, and he said, the buck stops here. We have made mistakes, because some journalists said, we're not blaming you, sir. And he said, well, you should blame me. And I thought that was very admirable. He said, you should be blaming me. You should be blaming the department. We are the government. We have our role, and we have let you down in a way. But this is everybody's responsibility as well. But I think there's a lot that hasn't been thought through, and I worry about it. I worry about the exemptions. Electric vehicles are now exempt from the odd-even scheme.
Yes, electric and hybrid, right.
And hybrid. I support the idea of electric and hybrid, but don't you think that's a little bit discriminatory? That now if you have an electric car, you don't take up the same amount of space as a combustion vehicle? Of course you do. You take up the same patch of road as any diesel, gasoline, or any powered vehicle. And then if they argue, well, it's better for the environment, we don't know that for sure. That's just the press release. That's the narrative. I mean, there are benefits. I'm not saying there are none, but there's also a carbon footprint to making these cars. So you want to argue about that. It's like going back to the vaccine all over again. Those who have had it are allowed entry here, and those who don't have it are not allowed out. And then we find out it doesn't really stop transmission anyway. Right. It's the same type of effect that's getting people very riled up, myself included, as you could probably tell.
Finally, James, what do you think of the other measures that might help ease the traffic congestion in EDSA? Like they're thinking of adding more buses to the EDSA bus carousel, taking out the X-ray machines, and maybe some that added layer of inspection in the LRT or MRT. What are your thoughts on that?
Those do help. Of course, they do help. I don't know if they're going to go directly into the heart of the problem, because the heart of the problem here is, as much as I hate to say it, private cars are the bulk of the congestion that they're trying to solve. And a lot of private car owners don't necessarily take buses. This is a cultural change that we'd like to see happen. So maybe if they introduce more P2P buses, more of these other buses that maybe might entice a car owner, not necessarily somebody who would take a bus normally, but somebody who would not take a bus normally, entice them in with air-conditioned, clean P2P buses. That might help. Taking away the security at the lines, I think, will also help. It does raise other concerns for me, because if we can take it away, it shows that we never really needed it. That question should be answered too. Another thing is, how are they going to handle the coding? Are they doing this through NCAP? Because if they're doing it through NCAP, how do they determine which one is a Grab and which one is just a private Vios? How do they know about seniors are exempt from coding under some jurisdictions and laws? How do they know a senior's not in the car if they're doing it NCAP-wise? These are the questions I've asked the data that they haven't been able to answer. And we're on the eve of already a trial. And that makes me very, very concerned, because as we've talked about, we've had months to do this. And now we're scrambling on the eve of implementation saying, maybe we should, let's get back to you. No, you shouldn't be getting back. You should all have this prepared. And this is why people are concerned.
Yes. And also, James, I think a lot of people are open to taking public transport. It's just that public transport here in this country is just so bad.
Exactly. The same people that you talk about, as soon as they jump on a plane to Singapore or Hong Kong or even Thailand, they're jumping on the BART, they're jumping on the MRTs there. They're commuting because it's more efficient. It's not a class thing, it's a matter of efficiency. And I think we could get the same effect here if we created the same efficiency. I think somebody with a good, it wouldn't matter what socioeconomic background they came from, if they could get to where they're going half the time in comfort and convenience, they would take it. Absolutely. And that what worries me, Mai, as well, is that the effect that this may have is people may just end up buying more cars. And then once this temporary measure is done, we're ending up with a permanent problem of more cars on the road than we can actually take. And as Ronald Reagan used to say, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government restriction. And that worries me because in the 90s, if you recall, we have coding as a result of a temporary measure while the MRT was being built. That's 30 years ago.
So we should really just address the root of the problem.
Yes, you know, I another analogy I could use here, it's like when you debase currency. You know, you can print more money so that, you know, you solve a temporary problem, but then it just creates hyperinflation later on, or debasement of your currency. The same thing happens with coding. When you keep coding, you enter this spiral where you can't get out of, because now you've added more cars on the road, and now you cannot draw that back. You can't walk it back. Like, can you imagine taking coding out now?
Yeah.
It would be chaos.
Appreciate your thoughts on this, James. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you for coming to the phone. Thank you. Motoring journalist James Deacon.
Thank you.
Justice Secretary Boying Remulla inspects the NAIA Terminal 3, saying they are exploring ways to improve passenger experience. He also gave an update on the probe into former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque. Joash Malimban joins us from the NAIA for this story. Joash, what did the Justice Secretary say?
Mai, that's right. During the inspection of DOJ Secretary Boying Remulla here, he confirmed that former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque is holding at least 2 Philippine passports. Authorities say this may explain why Roque was able to leave the country without raising alarms. The DOJ suspects discrepancies between the passports, possibly in the middle or second name, which may have prevented detection. The DOJ also reveals that Roque allegedly exited the country through a backdoor route in Tawi-Tawi, where he boarded a speedboat bound for Malaysia. Now, the Department of Justice says it is coordinating with the Department of Foreign Affairs to investigate how this was allowed to happen. Just yesterday, Secretary Remulla confirmed that the process to cancel Roque's passports is already underway. If Roque refuses to return to the Philippines, the DOJ says he will be considered a fugitive. This development follows the release of an arrest warrant against Roque and 40-plus others regarding allegations of a non-bailable charge over qualified human trafficking. Mai.
Thank you for that report, Joash Malimban. Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong laments what he says is a rise in criminality nationwide. On Billionaire News channels at the forefront, Magalong said peace and order issues might be among the reasons behind the recent low trust rating of President Bongbong Marcos. A new Pulse Asia survey shows Marcos's rating stood at 32%, trailing behind those of Vice President Sara Duterte and her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte.
Isa sa mga disapproval kay Presidente, number 1 is yung inflation. Pangalawa is corruption, di ba? Pangalawa is corruption. And number 3 is yung fighting criminality. Dati-rati raw, pag tumawag sila sa pulis, let us say meron silang na-detect na ongoing na mga parang drug transactions, ano? O feeling nila na merong mga presence ng mga drug addicts sa lugar nila. Pag tumawag sila noon, ang bilis ng reaction. Ngayon daw, it takes time for the police to react.
An update now on the 46th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur. Southeast Asian leaders signed a landmark agreement that sets out a 20-year vision for regional integration among member countries. Called ASEAN 2045, Our Shared Future, the declaration sets a long-term roadmap to strengthen peace, prosperity, and unity across the region. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim describes the agreement as a defining chapter in ASEAN's journey.
The future we seek must rest on foundations of sustainability and inclusion. ASEAN's integration must be genuinely people-centered. That means closing development gaps, raising the standards of living, and investing in the human spirit and potential of all our citizens. This shared blueprint gives shape to that belief. It is a vision anchored in realism animated by resolve and made possible by trust.
Tragedy strikes a parade celebrating Liverpool's Premier League title victory. At least 27 people were hospitalized after a car plowed into a crowd of fans. Two of the victims, a child and an adult, are in serious condition. A 53-year-old British man was arrested.
What I can tell you is that we believe this to be an isolated incident, and we are not currently looking for anyone else in relation to it. The incident is not being treated as terrorism.
A symbolic visit by King Charles to Canada. It's his first trip to the former British colony since becoming king in September 2022, a show of support for a country that's being eyed by U.S. President Donald Trump to become America's 51st state. Charles met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Canadian Governor General Mary Simon and toured Ottawa with his wife, Queen Camilla. The 76-year-old king will open Parliament on Tuesday, the first time a British monarch has carried out the duty since his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth, did so 68 years ago. French President Emmanuel Macron playing down what appears to be an embarrassing moment as he and his wife, Brigitte, arrived in Vietnam Sunday. Before Macron disembarked from his plane, someone shoved him in the face. That someone later turned out to be the missus. On Monday, Macron described the incident as nothing but a moment of closeness. The couple has been married since 2007. The French leader is in Hanoi as part of a Southeast Asian tour. He will also visit Indonesia and Singapore. We're taking a break. Still to come, Billie Eilish takes a top prize at this year's American Music Awards. Entertainment and sports up next. This is Newsfeed at noon. You're back in Newsfeed at noon. OPM legend and folk musician Freddie Aguilar has passed away. He was 72. His death was confirmed by attorney George Briones of Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, where he previously served as National Executive Vice President. He was also appointed Presidential Advisor on Culture and the Arts under the Duterte administration. Aguilar is best known for timeless classics like Anak and Bayan Ko. In other news, Billie Eilish takes the top prize at this year's American Music Awards. She won Artist of the Year over other nominees including Taylor Swift, Kendrick Lamar, and Sabrina Carpenter. That's So True singer Gracie Abrams also had a big night as she won New Artist of the Year. Meantime, pop superstar Janet Jackson was honored with the Icon Award. In her acceptance speech, She said she never really considered herself an icon, but she hopes she serves as an inspiration to other artists to follow their dreams. In sports, French Open defending champs Iga Świątek and Carlos Alcaraz are off to the next round. Świątek cruised past Slovakia's Rebeka Sharomkova in straight sets. The Polish superstar will next face Britain's Emma Raducanu. Alcaraz also made short work of Italian qualifier Giulio Zippieri in straight sets. Up next for the Spanish champion Fabian Marozsan of Hungary. Meanwhile, Yannick Sinner secures his 15th consecutive Grand Slam win. The world number one launched his hunt for a maiden French Open veteran Richard Gasquet in the second round at Roland Garros.
Sì, credo che è stata una partita.
I am happy, and obviously, this place is very special for me. I know what we achieved last year here, and this year we will see, but I'm very happy. Day by day, we hope to improve. Now I have 2 days off, not just one, which gives me a bit more time.
And those in the news this hour, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Keep it here on the Billionaire News Channel. Good afternoon.